Hi, welcome to Matt's Garage. So you saw in the title, the motor is done. I didn't videotape a whole lot of it, but I'll just give you a quick rundown with the parts I did videotape. First thing I did was I took my comp cam's cam, which is one of their extreme, whatever, but it's a torque-oriented cam, so low in the RPM range. Hammered the little pin into it. I had to cut that off to make it the right length, and then installed the cam, pretty straightforward. Then when it came to the lifters, I created a little vacuum device using a pickle jar and a tire wheel valve stem. Filled it with oil, then used my brake bleeding tool that's pneumatic, sucked all the bubbles out of the lifters, the roller lifters, installed those, went ahead and installed the new AFR heads, which look super sexy. You know, head bolts, pretty straightforward, torqued everything down, and then went through the process of installing my roller rockers, which is more involved than other things I've done with rocker arms. I've only ever used stock rocker arms, but these you gotta get, first you gotta order the right length push rod. I needed to order push rods that were 1/4 inch longer. You can see here I've established a perfect middle pattern using an adjustable push rod. And then once it was assembled, I painted it and then spent a week or two installing it, taking my sweet time, you know, with the transmission and the clutch and all the connections and everything. So let me bring you in closer, show you the motor. It doesn't look a whole lot different than before, but I did change to the darker Ford blue. It's actually like a medium Ford blue. I didn't, a reminder, that was the original color, which is like a lighter tractor blue. It just felt like the darker color looked better with this red. And tuned the carb and got everything running. You saw it started up. That was totally cold. Runs great. At first, I was getting a lot of smoke out of that tailpipe when it was warmed up, and I thought, here we go again. I screwed something up, but I realized it was just the old oil burning out of the muffler. So once it warmed up, it cleared up. Other than that, not a whole lot of change in here. I did end up finishing the installation of my new tilt steering column with the Tom's Off-Road wood wrap steering wheel, and I think the horn works. Okay, that took a while to get that figured out, but I put an extension on the shifter. It's too long. I gotta figure something out for that, but like stock, it's a little too short. I don't like reaching for my stick, but easy, boys. But anyway, and then there's still some dangly electronics under the dash, which I need to address shortly. But otherwise, it's running great. It's tuned fairly closely, but not perfectly tuned. Here's the thing about carburetors. I love them. They're analog. They work great. Once you get the tune in, they're pretty reliable. But they're never perfect and they're never efficient. So right now I've got an AFR gauge inside that tells me what I'm doing, so I tune to the AFR gauge. But in some conditions it's rich, in some conditions it's lean. So you got to take the information from when you're driving and then tune that into the carb, go for a test drive, come back, tweak it, test it, tweak it, test it. And I was looking for a tool that would make that a lot easier, and I think I found it. Let me go grab it. It comes in kind of a big box, but this should solve all of your carburetor tuning concerns. Fuel injection. So I opted for the Pro-Flo 4 from Edelbrock. I've had my eye on this system for a long time. I know John at Nashville Early Bronco has one installed on his Nash, and he likes it. That's the plan. That's what the next episode is going to be, is the installation of this Pro-Flo 4 system. And I wanted to talk to you guys about why I went with this versus some of the other ones on the market. So may I have a seat? May I have a seat? Okay. There's a few systems out there that are designed for, let's say, consumer level gearheads, right? There's Sniper 2, Phytech, and Edelbrock Pro-Flo. Once you get out of that, you're getting into the custom world where you're using like a Holley Terminator X or whatever, and you're programming all the ins and outs, and it's far more powerful, far more capable, and far more complex for guys like us. The thing about the Sniper 2, the Phytech, and the Pro-Flo, they're all sort of self-learning, and all that means for guys who don't know is, you heard me describe what I was doing to tune the carburetor. Well, the fuel injection, the self-learning just does that automatically. So, there's sensors for throttle position, manifold absolute pressure, which is like your vacuum, the temperature of the air, the temperature of the engine, and then you have your O2 sensor. So let's take that O2 sensor as the output, and all those other sensors as the input. So when you drive, there's a table. You've all heard of fuel tables, and each square represents some combination of those factors: air temperature, throttle, coolant temperature, and vacuum. And then on the other end, on the output, it's reading what the air-fuel ratio is. And so if at 20% throttle, at 180 degrees, and it's 40-degree air outside, and it's pulling 12 degrees of vacuum, the AFR is reading, say, 12, too rich. So it'll lean it out in that condition in real time, and it'll build that fuel table for all the millions of different possibilities, probably thousands actually. And it will keep changing them as you drive. And so that's why it's self-learning, because it fills in the fuel table to match up with the reading it's getting on the O2 sensor. That's all self-learning is. I had the Sniper 1 on the Scout, and I like that system, but it had some issues. The way the throttle is a little too twitchy, and that's because both throttle blades open at the same time, unless you got a progressive linkage, and then you had to tune the progressive linkage, and it was never quite as smooth as I liked. The other issue with the Sniper 1 is the ECU, the computer, is on the front of it. Well, Fords have the distributor on the front of the motor, so do Mopars, I think. And the electronic interference from the distributor and the coil wreaked havoc with the original Snipers, especially in the Ford applications. I understand the Sniper 2 is rectifying that, but I've never used one. Phytech, I don't know what their latest model's up to. Some guys swear by them. There was a Phytech on one of those Cougars I'd bought, and it worked great. Some guys have nightmares with them. I can't comment on it because I don't know. What I can say is that both the Sniper 2 and the Phytech are throttle body injection. So it looks like a carburetor, and the fuel gets into the motor at that carburetor-like throttle body. So it's just a mass, it just shoots out of the injectors, and then it goes down the runners of the intake into the cylinder, whichever cylinder's open and sucking vacuum at that time, and it's intake stroke, that's where the fuel goes. So it's kind of indiscriminate. What sets the Pro-Flo apart are a couple things. One is it is not throttle body injection. It is, I think it's sequential multi-port injection. So there's an injector on each intake runner. So in order to do that, this actually comes with its own intake manifold, special for the Pro-Flo, because it's got the intake runners, or it's got the bosses on the intake runners for fuel injectors. So it's got 8 fuel injectors, 2 rails, and that's what shoots based on what cylinder is firing at any given time. This also comes with a distributor, so it controls timing. Because what I described earlier with the feedback loop with the O2 sensor is half the equation. Timing is the other half of the equation. I can't speak to Phytech, but I know with Sniper 2 you can control timing by either creating a lockout distributor and having it talk to that, or buying a Sniper 2 distributor, which you also need to buy the control box. So when you add up the control box, the Sniper 2, and the distributor, it ends up running you around 1,800 bucks, say, roughly. This sucker was on sale for Black Friday for like $2,100 from Summit, something like that. So in the end, and it comes with its own intake manifold. Now I already have an intake manifold, so that value is not really there, but ultimately at that price point, I've always wanted to go fuel injection, so I sprung for this system. The review, there's only 7 reviews on Summit for this particular model number, and it's kind of shocking. You'd think more guys are running it, but so I'll be sure to do a review. But in order to install this, I need to drain the coolant, get all the stuff off the top of the motor, and and then just install this over. Now, if you're doing this at home, the biggest challenge for you is going to be your fuel system. I don't have that challenge because I've got the Ford Explorer front dress on the front of my motor, which never had a mechanical fuel pump provision. So I've always ran an in-tank fuel pump. Originally, I'd modified the stock tank with a PA2, a TankSync PA2 pump retrofit, put that in the stock system. Once I drove to Medford, I realized if I'm driving any distance at all, I need range. I won the 23-gallon tank at the Tom's Off-Road Raffle in Medford, so I installed that. It's got the in-tank pump. So if you don't have an in-tank pump, I would not recommend going with an external pump. Just figure out a way to get an in-tank pump. Either retrofit your existing tank or spring for the 23-gallon tank. And right now it's just got a regulator that steps it down to a carburetor pressure, and I've ordered a regulator for fuel injection pressure, which is like 58 degrees versus the 4 to 6, which the Edelbrock carburetor likes. So I've already got my system set up for it. If you don't, you'll have to do the fuel tank, new fuel lines and fuel filter, and a fuel pressure regulator to step it down. And then wiring is pretty straightforward. You know, you got constant power, battery power, and a couple other hookups. You know, you got to run obviously power your fuel tank, sorry, your fuel pump, and you're done. So I've already got a relay for my fuel pump since I'm already running it. I've got a video on relays. You can search YouTube under my channel or whatever. But that's it. Set up some relays, get it on there, get it installed. So on the next episode, we're going to unbox this and then install it. And I'll try to do a fairly thorough video. It's kind of hard for me. I'm not a videographer, and it's always broken up, right? I come in, do a couple hours of work, go out, come back, do that. And John has a great video on the Pro-Flo, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how this thing runs. Okay, I can stop sitting. Now, you know, here's the 300 of you who are still watching. I've got an issue with this Bronco and would love some advice. The rear leaf springs. So when I go over a bump, the front goes over fairly smoothly for a short wheelbase, very light truck. The rear bucks like a mule. I took the shocks off. These are the Tom's Off-Road shocks that are designed for the front. I'm running them in the rear because the 66 has an I stud configuration, unlike most of you guys have the 68 and later, which has the II configuration. So, and it's soft. The rear, that front shock is actually soft, so it's not the shocks causing it. I thought maybe I'd torque down the leaf spring bolts with like an impact hammer. I checked those bolts, they're not stiff. Like I raised the truck up and down on the frame so that the suspension can cycle. It definitely cycles. I think my rear leaves are just too stiff, and they should be stock rear leaves. So my question to you guys is, have any of you actually removed a rear leaf from your Bronco spring pack? I did it on the Scout a bunch of times to tune the leaf spring, so I know how to physically do it, but like, which ones did you remove? I think there's 6 in there. Did you run into any issues? Feel free to comment below, give me any advice, or email me at mattsgarageshow@gmail.com. Also, if anybody wants to help with any of this, my Patreon link is in the comments. Also, if anybody's curious to find out if that old motor has either ovaled or tapered cylinders, maybe if you would donate a bore gauge, I could give you a shout out on an episode where I actually open up that motor and take measurements of the engine and see if it's out of round or tapered. Just a thought, no pressure. And yeah, so that's it for today. We're going to drain the coolant, get everything torn out, and install this Pro-Flo next time on Matt's Garage.